Half, she said, and in the silence of the expensive restaurant, the words sounded like a gunshot. I believe I am rightfully entitled to half. I slowly put down my fork. The fine china of the plate clinked under its weight. My gaze drifted across the table, from the perfectly white tablecloth to her face. The face of a 25-year-old girl who, just a month ago, had become the new Mrs. Warren. A girl named Jessica. She looked at me with a disarming, almost childlike confidence, as if she were asking me to pass the salt, not for a controlling stake in my $500 million company. Before the video starts, don't forget to subscribe and drop a like. Enjoy the video. Next to her sat my ex-husband, Mark. He avoided my gaze, intently studying the pattern on his tie. The same Mark with whom I had started this business in my parents' garage, soldering the first microchips and living on instant noodles. The same Mark who, 3 years ago, announced he needed to find himself, and found himself in the arms of his young assistant. Half of what exactly, my dear? My voice was surprisingly steady. A storm was brewing inside me, a mixture of shock, anger, and a strange, dark amusement. The company, of course. Jessica smiled as if explaining the obvious. I'm part of the family now. I'm Mark's wife. Everything that belongs to him belongs to me. And since he created the company with you, his share. She didn't finish, but the thought was clear. In her world, marriage was a magic wand that turned her from a recent graduate into the co-owner of a tech giant. My name is Chloe. I am 42 years old, and I am the CEO and sole owner of Innovate Dynamics. The very company that this naive girl had just tried to slice in half like a wedding cake. I looked at Mark. He finally raised his eyes, and they were filled with a mixture of guilt and pathetic hope. He hoped I would explode, make a scene, and then he could play the victim and she, the defender of family values. But I didn't explode. At that moment, looking at their two faces, one young and greedy, the other painfully familiar and distorted by weakness, I made a decision. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't scream. I would let them play this game. I would give them the rope, and they would weave it into a noose for their ambitions themselves. An interesting thought, I said, picking up my wine glass. We should definitely discuss this. I took a sip, feeling the cold Sauvignon Blanc extinguish the fire inside, leaving only an icy calm. They mistook my composure for weakness, for confusion. They didn't know that I had already won this war 3 years ago, in the quiet office of my lawyer. They just hadn't heard the final shot yet. The following Monday began with a surprise. Entering my office on the 40th floor of the glass skyscraper, I found Jessica there. She was rearranging the awards on my desk with a businesslike air. Entrepreneur of the Year, Innovation Leader, Woman in Tech. Good morning, Chloe, she chirped. I thought this place needed a woman's touch. It's also severe. Maybe we could add some orchids. And the wall color. This gray is so dreary. My assistant, Emily, stood by the door looking as if she'd seen a ghost. I gave her a barely perceptible nod, letting her know everything was under control. Good morning, Jessica. What brings you here so early? I asked, placing my bag on the leather sofa. Well, of course. I'm a partner now, she said the word with a breathy reverence. I decided to dive into things. Mark said I could take that corner office. It's been empty since the VP of marketing left anyway. I barely suppressed a smile. That empty office was intended for the new executive I had painstakingly poached from a competitor, who was due to start in a week. Of course, I said. Make yourself at home. Emily, be so kind as to have the office prepared for Jessica. And provide her with everything she needs. Jessica's eyes lit up. She didn't understand that everything she needs, in my view, was a computer without access to the internal network, a phone without long-distance calling privileges, and a keycard that opened no doors except the restroom and the cafeteria. An hour later, Mark appeared. He walked into my office with the confidence of a man who had returned home after a long absence. Chloe, we need to discuss the strategy for the next quarter, he announced from the doorway. I was thinking we're too focused on corporate clients. We need to enter the mass market. Jessica had a great idea. I listened silently as he paced the carpet, waving his arms. The same carpet we had chosen together 10 years ago. He spoke of things he had ceased to understand years ago. Ever since he traded nights over blueprints for nights in bars, and morning planning sessions for morning jogs in the park. His knowledge of the company was an eternity out of date. He was like the captain of a pirate ship trying to command a nuclear aircraft carrier. "Mark," I interrupted gently when he paused for breath. "I appreciate your enthusiasm. But strategic decisions are made by the board of directors based on reports prepared by department heads. Your ideas sound fresh. Why don't you put them in writing? Prepare a presentation with market analysis, forecasts, budget calculations. I will be sure to review it." He frowned, clearly not expecting such a bureaucratic response. He wanted to command, not work. "A presentation. Chloe, we're not strangers. Let's just..." "It's precisely because we're not strangers that we must follow procedure," I cut in. "In this company, everyone is equal before the rules. Even me." He pressed his lips together but didn't argue. He was sure this was just a temporary hurdle, my last attempt to cling to the illusion of power. They were both sure of it. Thus began their workdays. Jessica enthusiastically took on improving the corporate culture. She tried to organize a yoga day in the office, suggested replacing the coffee machines with a smoothie bar, and started a channel for sharing memes in the company-wide chat. The polite, well-trained employees smiled at her, nodded, and then came to my office asking, "Chloe, what's going on?" I gave them all the same answer. "Just do your jobs. Do not follow any orders from Mr. Warren or his wife without my written confirmation." Meanwhile, Mark tried to play the role of the Grey Cardinal. He would summon department heads to his office, which used to be a meeting room, and try to give them instructions. He demanded financial reports, client lists, access to the servers. My CFO, David, a silver-haired and unflappable veteran of corporate wars, was an impregnable fortress for him. "I'm sorry, Mark," he would say with a stone-faced expression. "This information is confidential. Access is only possible with a direct order from the CEO, that is, Chloe." "But I'm a founder of the company," Mark would fume. "You were," David would patiently correct him. "According to the documents, you sold your stake 3 years ago. Legally, you are now an outside party to the company." Every such refusal fueled their anger and their conviction that I was deliberately obstructing them. They didn't understand that it wasn't me but the system I had built that was rejecting them like a foreign body. A month passed. Mark and Jessica realized their attempts to help were yielding no results. They couldn't sign a single document, close a single deal, or hire or fire a single person. They were like ghosts wandering the halls of a company they considered their own. Their presence created a tense atmosphere, but work did not stop. My well-oiled machine continued to function, ignoring their fuss. One evening, as I was about to go home, an enraged Jessica burst into my office. "I tried to order new business cards," she blurted out. "They refused me. They said my position isn't in the staff directory." "What does that mean, Chloe?" She threw her phone on the table, the screen displaying a chat with the supply department. "It means exactly what they told you, Jessica," I answered calmly, taking off my glasses. "Your position does not exist. But you said I could work here. You gave me an office. I allowed you to be here. Those are different things. I was waiting for you to prove yourself, to show what you're capable of. But aside from ideas for repainting walls and organizing parties, I've heard nothing from you." Her face contorted. "I'm Mark's wife. I'm a co-owner. That issue, as I understand it, has not yet been resolved," I noted coldly. She gave me a contemptuous look. "You're just scared. Scared that we'll do a better job than you. That we'll bring new energy. And you're just an old, bitter woman clinging to the past." Her words were calculated to hit a nerve. And, I admit for a moment they did. A bitter woman. Perhaps, but definitely not a weak one. If you're so confident in your abilities, prove it, I said, rising from my desk. Convince the board of directors that you would be better leaders than I am. Call a meeting. Present your program. And let them decide. I threw down the gauntlet. And they accepted it. They were so blinded by their greed and self-assurance that they didn't see the trap. They thought I was surrendering, that I was offering them a fair fight, not knowing that I determined the battlefield and its rules. Over the next 2 weeks, they launched a flurry of activity. Mark called the board members with whom he once had good relations. He told them I had lost my edge after the divorce, that my decisions had become impulsive and were harming the company. He promised them a golden age, a new era of prosperity under his experienced leadership. Jessica worked on image. She gave a few interviews to second-rate online publications with headlines like "New Blood for an Old Empire." Jessica Warren on the future of Innovate Dynamics. She posed against our logo, talked about the importance of family values in business, and how she and Mark plan to take the company to a fundamentally new level. I watched all this with cold curiosity. My lawyer Leonard called me every day. "Chloe, they're digging their own graves," he would say with a chuckle. "They're creating such a volume of evidence of their incompetence and bad intentions that any court would be on our side if it came to that." "It won't come to court, Leo," I would reply. "We'll finish it all at the board meeting. Make sure all the documents are ready. Every page, every signature." The day before the meeting, Mark and Jessica, confident of their victory, came to my office. They no longer hid their triumph. "It all ends tomorrow, Chloe," Mark said with poorly concealed malice. "The board is on our side. We're offering you a chance to leave on good terms. We're prepared to give you a generous severance package for your past contributions." "A severance package?" I raised an eyebrow. "For leaving my own company." "It's not yours anymore," Jessica interjected, placing a hand on Mark's shoulder. "It's ours. Families. It's time you accept that and move on." I looked at them and smiled. For the first time in all this, I smiled at them genuinely. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," I said. "It's going to be a very, very educational meeting." They left, leaving behind a trail of cheap perfume and expensive self-satisfaction. I remained in my office, looking out at the night city, at the lights of the skyscrapers, each one a symbol of someone's dream, someone's struggle. My struggle was coming to an end, and I knew I would emerge victorious. The boardroom on the 45th floor was my favorite place in the building. A huge dark wood table, panoramic windows with a view of the entire city, an atmosphere of power and decision-making. That day, the air in it seemed to crackle with tension. The 8 members of the board of directors were in their seats. I had known each of them for many years. Robert, an old friend of my father's, a wise and cautious investor. Sarah, a venture capital genius whom I had painstakingly convinced to join the board 5 years ago. Michael, our lead technical specialist, who had worked with me back in the garage. There were also those Mark considered his allies, 2 men he had once brought into the company and with whom he maintained friendly relations. Mark and Jessica sat across from me. Mark was in his best suit, and Jessica in a severe but expensive dress that she believed made her look more serious. They looked like a couple ready to deliver their coronation speech. My lawyer, Leonard, sat beside me, calm and focused, with a thin folder of documents in front of him. Robert, as the chairman of the board, opened the meeting. "Well, colleagues," he began in his steady baritone, "we are gathered here at the initiative of Mark Warren, who wishes to make a statement regarding the future leadership of the company. Mark, the floor is yours." Mark stood up. He cleared his throat and began his prepared speech. He spoke of returning to our roots, of how the company had lost the family spirit it had at its inception. He spoke of the need for a fresh perspective and new energy. He subtly hinted that I, due to personal struggles, had become conservative and incapable of taking risky but necessary steps. "My wife Jessica and I," he said, looking around at everyone, "are ready to take responsibility. We want to return Innovate Dynamics to a path of aggressive growth. I, as a founder, and Jessica, with her modern vision, represent the ideal tandem for this. Finishing, he sat down to the sparse applause of his two allies. Jessica looked at him with adoration. Then she took the floor. Her speech was short and emotional. She spoke of the right of the family, that a business created by a husband should also belong to the wife. She ended with the same phrase that had started it all. Therefore I, as the lawful wife of Mark Warren, declare my rights to 50% of the company's shares, which rightfully belonged to him. We don't just want to manage the company, we want to own it. As one family. A heavy silence fell in the room. The board members exchanged glances. Mark's two friends looked at him with bewilderment. It was one thing to support a change in leadership, and quite another to demand half the company. Finally, Robert turned to me. Chloe, do you have anything to say? I slowly stood up. I didn't look at Mark or Jessica. I looked at the members of the board. Distinguished members of the board, I began calmly. I have listened to many interesting, albeit reality-detached statements about family spirit, rights, and justice. But in business, as you all know, it is not words that matter, but documents. I nodded to Leonard. He pressed a button on his laptop, and the first document appeared on the huge screen behind me. It was a scanned copy of the divorce agreement between Mark Warren and me, signed 3 years ago. I will not bore you with legal jargon, I continued. I will simply ask my lawyer, Leonard, to read Clause 7.4 of this agreement. Leonard stood and, in a dry, official tone, read. Mark Warren, in exchange for a one-time payment of $25 million, fully and unconditionally waives all present and future claims to the company Innovate Dynamics, including but not limited to shares, assets, intellectual property, and any other forms of participation. This waiver is final and not subject to revision under any circumstances. Mark's face turned ashen. He stared at the screen as if he were seeing the text for the first time, even though he had signed it himself. But that's not all, I said, and the next clause appeared on the screen. Leonard, if you please, Clause 7.5. This waiver of claims, Leonard continued, extends not only to Mark Warren personally, but also to all his affiliated persons, including present and future spouses, heirs, trustees, and any other representatives. Any attempts by the aforementioned persons to make claims against Innovate Dynamics will be considered legally null and void. There was dead silence in the room. Jessica looked from the screen to Mark, her face a mask of complete incomprehension. What does this mean?" she whispered. "It means, my dear," I said, addressing her directly for the first time, "that your marriage to Mark gave you his last name, and nothing more. Not shares, not a stake in the business, not even the right to be in this building without my permission." I turned to Mark. His gaze was empty. He understood. He understood that 3 years ago, blinded by easy money and freedom, he had signed not just divorce papers. He had signed away his life's work. "I gave you $25 million, Mark." My voice hardened. "I gave you more than your share was worth at the time. I did it so you would get out of my life and my company forever. I anticipated that one day your greed or your foolishness, or as in this case, both, would bring you back. And I protected myself." I looked around the table. Mark and his wife have attempted to seize control of the company. They have spread false information, tried to pressure employees and you, esteemed members of the board. They have demonstrated a complete lack of business ethics and competence. Therefore, I put to a vote the question: do we consider any further involvement of Mark Warren or Jessica Warren in the company's affairs to be appropriate? Robert, without waiting for formalities, said, "I think the answer is obvious." All opposed. Even Mark's two friends raised their hands for opposed. Their faces showed a mixture of disappointment and disgust. "The decision is unanimous," Robert stated. He looked at Mark and Jessica. "I must ask you to leave the boardroom and the company building immediately." Mark sat motionless, staring at the table. Jessica jumped up, her face contorted with fury. "You're a cheat," she screamed at me. "You set this all up." "I set nothing up," I replied coldly. "I just know how to read contracts. And to think 2 steps ahead. Now if you please, the exit. Security will escort you." The door opened, and 2 security guards appeared on the threshold. Their presence was the final punctuation mark in this farce. Mark slowly rose. He didn't look at me. He just walked towards the exit, hunched over, as if he had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. Jessica, sobbing with anger and humiliation, rushed after him. When the door closed behind them, I allowed myself to exhale. I looked at the board members. There was respect on their faces. "My apologies for that circus," I said. "And now, if you don't mind, let's move on to the real agenda. I have some proposals regarding expansion into the Asian market." Work continued. After the meeting ended and everyone had left, I sat alone in the empty boardroom for a long time. Twilight was gathering outside, and the city was lighting its endless fires. I felt no triumph or malice. Only a vast, all-consuming relief. And exhaustion. For 3 years I had lived with this time bomb, knowing it would explode sooner or later. I had prepared for this day, calculating every step, every word. And now it was over. I remembered the day I signed the divorce papers. The pain of Mark's betrayal was still fresh and sharp. He, the person I had trusted more than myself, had left me for another, leaving behind the ruins of our 20-year life together. But even then, through the tears and pain, my mind worked clearly and coldly. I knew Mark. I knew his weakness for easy money and his tendency for rash actions. It was then that I insisted on including those very clauses in the agreement. My lawyer was surprised by my foresight. "Are you sure, Chloe? This looks like you're preparing for war." "I'm preparing for peace, Leo," I had told him then. "A long and lasting peace. And I got it. For the price of $25 million and a broken heart, I bought myself freedom. The freedom to build my life and my empire as I saw fit. Without looking back at someone else's greed and stupidity, I stood up and walked to the panoramic window. Below, life bustled on the streets. Thousands of cars, millions of people, each with their own story, their own struggle. My company was part of this huge organism. 'Twas alive. 'Twas mine. Not by documents, in essence. I had created it from an idea, from a dream, from sleepless nights and risky decisions. What Mark and Jessica did was not just an attempt to take my money. It was an attempt to take my story, my life. They lost not because I was cleverer. They lost because they wanted to possess, while I wanted to create. That was the whole difference. My phone vibrated. A message from Emily. "Chloe, Jessica Warren's office has been cleared out. What should I do with the orchids she ordered?" Smiled. "Keep them. Put them in the reception area. Let them be a reminder that beauty and strength are not always in bright colors. Sometimes they are in the strong roots that no one sees." I turned off the light in the boardroom and walked to the elevator. Ahead was a new night, and after it, a new day. My day. In my company. In my city. I was in my place. And for the first time in a long time I felt completely free. The war was over. Peace was beginning.